I used to think I had my feelings under control, that I could spend years around someone, smile through every interaction, sleep in the same house during every family vacation, and keep it cool, keep it platonic, keep it buried. I was wrong, because the night everything changed with Jake, my best friend's older brother, was the night I realized I'd been lying to myself for way too long. It started with a text. "Bro, come through. Jake's birthday tonight. Barbecue, drinks, backyard vibes. Start 7. That was from Eric, my best friend since we were 12. I wasn't gonna miss it, even if it meant seeing Jake again after a long stretch of accidental avoidance. Jake was complicated for me. He'd always been the golden boy. 3 years older than us, athletic, charming, the type who made people laugh just by being in the room. I used to crush on him, stupid hard in high school, but I told myself it was just admiration. It wasn't. It got worse in college. Every time I was home for holidays, Jake was somehow there. Taller, more built, that same messy dark hair, now paired with that scruff he didn't have back when he was just Eric's annoying brother. But nothing ever happened. Because he was straight. Because I wasn't about to mess up my friendship with Eric. Because it was safer to look and not touch. So yeah, I had reasons to be nervous that night. When I showed up, the party was already buzzing. Backyard lights strung up, burgers on the grill, beer bottles clinking. I found Eric near the fire pit, drink in hand, half laughing at some dumb story. "Yo, thought you ghosted us," he said, pulling me into a quick bro hug. "Nah," I said, forcing a grin. "Just traffic." "Jake's around back, I think. You should say hi," he asked if you were coming. My stomach did a slow somersault. "Cool," I said, trying to sound casual. I found Jake near the patio, leaning over the grill, flipping burgers like he owned the place. He looked up when I approached. And when he saw me, really saw me, his face lit up with that grin I'd tried so hard to forget. "There he is," Jake said, voice low, warm. "Didn't think you'd show." "I almost didn't," I admitted before I could stop myself. Then, recovering, "But I heard there was free food, so..." He laughed. "Always about the food with you, huh?" I rolled my eyes, trying to play it cool, but my heart was doing double time. He looked unfairly good. Tight gray tee stretched across his chest, a little sweat on his neck from the heat. A beer in one hand like this was just another normal night. We talked. About nothing and everything. About how work was going for him, contracting, still. How grad school was burning me out. How wild it was that time just kept passing like this. At some point, he handed me a burger and a beer, and we ended up sitting on the back steps, a little apart from the main group. That's when it shifted. "You look different," Jake said, taking a sip of his drink. I turned to him, eyebrows raised. Yeah, grown. In a good way." I snorted. "What, you mean I don't look like Eric's scrawny sidekick anymore?" Jake didn't laugh. "Nah, you've always been more than that." And then he looked at me. Really looked at me. I felt it in my gut, that tightening, that heat, that sense that something was about to happen. I didn't want to believe it. I'd spent too long building walls in my head, convincing myself Jake wasn't ever going to look at me like that. But that night, on those back steps, he did. Before I could say anything, someone called for Jake from the yard. He stood up, brushing his hand off on his jeans. "You sticking around?" he asked. I nodded, suddenly unsure of my voice. "Good," he said. Then, quieter, "Save me a drink. I'll come find you later." And he did. Hours later, after the crowd thinned and the music mellowed, he found me in the kitchen, nursing my third beer, eyes a little heavy from the buzz. He didn't say much, just looked at me with something unreadable in his face. Then he jerked his head toward the stairs. "Come chill upstairs for a sec? It's loud down here." I didn't even hesitate. I followed him. Jake's room hadn't changed much since high school. Still the same posters on the wall. Same shelf of dusty trophies. Same massive unmade bed. But it felt different walking in now. Like we weren't kids anymore. Like something was about to happen, and both of us knew it. He kicked the door shut behind us, not hard, just enough to muffle the bass from downstairs. "You good?" he asked, turning to face me. I nodded, leaning against his dresser, trying to play it cool. "Yeah. Just tired. Long week." He nodded slowly, stepping a little closer. "Same." And then it got quiet. That kind of quiet that's not really silence, just tension hanging heavy in the air, pressing on your chest like gravity's been cranked up. Jake ran a hand through his hair, looking like he was trying to figure out whether to say something or let it drop. "You ever think," he said finally, "about how weird time is?" I blinked. Sometimes," he smiled barely. "Like a few years ago, you were just Eric's friend. Always around, always chill. And now," his voice trailed off. He didn't finish the thought. I tilted my head. "Now what?" Jake looked up at me, something sharp and unsure behind his eyes. "Now I can't stop looking at you." My breath caught. I wasn't sure I heard him right. Or maybe I did, and my brain just refused to process it. "Say that again?" I asked, voice low. He stepped in closer, so close I could smell the beer on his breath, the faint scent of his cologne, something clean and woodsy, like pine and soap. I said. Jake repeated, slower this time. "I can't stop looking at you." I didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, my heart slamming against my ribs, watching his eyes flick between mine like he was waiting for me to shut him down. But I didn't, so he kept going. "I don't know when it started," he said, his voice barely above a whisper now. "Maybe it was last Christmas when you came over and sat on that stupid couch in your pajamas. Maybe it was last week when I saw that picture of you at graduation. Or maybe it's been longer, I don't know." He exhaled, looked away. "All I know is, I can't ignore it anymore." "Jake," I started, but he cut me off with a look. "Just, before you say anything, I know this is weird. I know I'm Eric's brother. I know we're not supposed to be having this conversation." He took another step closer, "but I can't pretend anymore that I don't think about you when you're not around." My mouth had gone dry. My thoughts a total mess. I'd imagined moments like this 100 times, but they were always just fantasies, little daydreams that evaporated the second I came back to reality. But this was real. "Why now?" I asked, finally finding my voice. "Why tonight?" Jake smiled, a little sadly. "I don't know. Maybe the beer. Maybe because you showed up looking like that. Or maybe because I finally got tired of pretending I didn't feel something every time you looked at me." There was a pause. Then he added, "And maybe I hoped you felt it too." I stared at him. For a second, I thought about Eric. About how messy this could get. About how long I'd kept this feeling buried. Not just because I didn't think Jake would ever feel the same, but because I didn't want to ruin what we all had. But none of that mattered right then. Not when Jake was standing in front of me like that. Not when his hand reached up, slowly, hesitantly, and brushed against my arm. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. Instead, I stepped closer. Our faces were inches apart now. The tension so thick it felt like the air had gone solid. "I do feel it," I said quietly. His breath hitched. Then, in a voice that was almost a whisper, he asked, "Can I kiss you?" I didn't answer him. Not with words, at least. Instead, I closed the last inch between us and kissed him. It was slow at first. Careful, like we were both still checking to see if this was real, if the moment would shatter under the weight of what we were doing. His lips were soft, tentative, tasting faintly of beer and something else I couldn't place. Maybe nerves. But when I didn't pull away, when I leaned in just a little more, everything shifted. Jake's hand slid up to the back of my neck, fingers threading through my hair as he deepened the kiss, no longer cautious. There was a hunger there, something that had clearly been building for longer than either of us wanted to admit. It wasn't perfect or smooth, there was too much tension, too much emotion for that, but it was real, and it hit me right in that moment, that this wasn't just a one-time spark. This had been waiting to happen for years. We broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads touching. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me with something raw in his expression, like relief and panic all tangled together. "I shouldn't have done that," he said, but his thumb was still on my cheek. He hadn't moved away. I searched his face. "You regret it?" Jake was quiet for a second, then shook his head. "No, that's the problem." There was a knock on the front door downstairs. Loud. Sudden. It jolted us back to reality. Jake pulled back, ran a hand over his face, and let out a quiet sigh. "That's probably Eric," he muttered, glancing toward the window. "He went on a beer run earlier." I nodded slowly, still trying to process what had just happened. My lips still tingled, my chest was tight with adrenaline, and I wasn't sure how I was supposed to just go back downstairs and act normal. Jake looked at me again, his voice softer this time. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, just didn't expect tonight to go like this." He gave a half smile. "Me either." Another knock. This one more impatient. Jake ran a hand through his hair, then stepped toward the door. "Give me like 5 minutes. I'll come find you, all right?" "Okay," I said, voice low. I slipped out of his room while he went to answer the door. The hallway felt colder than before. Louder. Like the house had woken back up after a dream. Downstairs, the party was picking up again. People laughing. Someone shouting about the grill. I made my way back out to the backyard, trying to blend in, trying to breathe. I stood near the fire pit, clutching a fresh beer someone handed me without even asking. The minutes dragged. I caught glimpses of Jake through the sliding glass door, talking to Eric, laughing at something, completely unreadable. He looked like the same guy everyone knew and loved. Like nothing had happened. But I knew better. And then, finally, he came out. He didn't come straight to me. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he drifted around the group, casual, effortless, until he found a spot beside me, close enough that our shoulders brushed. "You good?" he murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. I nodded, barely. Later, he said, so soft it was almost a breath, "When they're gone, stay." Then he walked off again like nothing had happened. And I stood there, staring into the fire, trying to calm the storm inside me. Because Jake, my best friend's older brother, had just kissed me and wanted more. The next few hours felt like some kind of surreal, slow burn movie, where every glance, every brush of a shoulder, every shared look across the yard was heavy with meaning. Jake didn't come near me again, not in a way that would draw attention, but I felt him everywhere. He laughed at someone's joke by the cooler, his head thrown back just slightly. I caught him watching me from across the yard, eyes lingering a second too long before he turned away. It was subtle, careful, but it was enough to keep my heart pounding the entire night. Eric, of course, was oblivious. He was busy playing DJ from his phone and trying to convince everyone that his playlist was objectively perfect. Every time he looked at me, I felt like I was doing something wrong, even though nothing really had happened. Not yet, but that made it worse. The waiting. At some point, the party started winding down. People left in pairs, in Ubers, with half-hearted hugs and tipsy goodbyes. I helped Eric toss solo cups into trash bags, anything to keep my hands busy. I kept glancing at the clock, wondering if I should leave too, wondering if I had the nerve to stay. By the time the last guest left, it was nearly 2 a.m. Eric was slumped on the couch, sipping water and scrolling through his phone. "You can crash here if you want," he muttered, not looking up. "Couch is all yours." "Thanks," I said, trying to keep my voice level. He yawned, waved me off. "I'm dead. I'm gonna knock out." A few minutes later, he disappeared down the hall to his room, door clicking shut behind him. And then, it was just me and Jake. I sat there for a minute in the quiet, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. The tension that had been simmering all night now felt like it was pressing down on my chest. I stood, walked slowly to the kitchen to rinse out my cup. Then I heard it. A door creaked open upstairs. Soft footsteps on the stairs. I didn't turn around until he spoke. "You stayed," Jake said, his voice low and rough with something I couldn't name. I nodded, still facing the sink. "You told me to." He stepped closer. I could feel him behind me now, the same way I had back in his room. That same heat. "I wasn't sure if you would," he said. I finally turned to look at him. I wasn't either. He looked at me like he was trying to memorize every detail. The way my hair fell, the way my eyes looked under the kitchen light, the way my chest rose and fell with every shaky breath. Jake stepped in closer. We were inches apart again. "You're sure?" he asked. I didn't need to think. "Yeah?" And then he kissed me again. This time, there was no hesitation. No slow build, just fire. His hands gripped my hips like he was afraid I'd disappear. I clutched the back of his neck, pulled him in harder, deeper. The kiss was desperate. Months, maybe years, in the making. Everything we hadn't said, hadn't allowed ourselves to feel, poured into that moment. He walked me backward until my back hit the edge of the counter, never breaking the kiss. My fingers tangled in his shirt, fisting the fabric like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. He pulled back just enough to look at me. "We can stop," he said, breathing hard. "Just say the word." I shook my head. "Don't stop." Jake's jaw tightened like he was trying to hold something back. Then he kissed me again, harder, and I knew right then. We'd crossed a line there was no going back from, and neither of us wanted to. We made it up the stairs in a blur. Quiet steps, hushed laughter, hearts racing like we were breaking some sacred rule. Jake's hand never left mine as he led me back to his room, the door closing with a soft click that somehow felt louder than it should have. The room was dark, except for the soft spill of light from the hallway. He didn't rush anything this time. He just looked at me. Really looked. And it was like the silence between us said everything we hadn't had the guts to admit before. "You okay?" he asked again, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, stepping closer until our chests were brushing. "Yeah, are you?" He let out a quiet breath, the kind you only exhale when you've been holding something in for too long. "I've wanted this for a while." My hand found his jaw, rough with stubble, warm under my palm. "Yeah?" He leaned into my touch. "Yeah?" Then he kissed me again, slower this time, deeper. Not like earlier downstairs, all heat and adrenaline. This was something else, something deliberate, like he wanted to remember what it felt like he didn't want to rush through something he'd been thinking about too long. My hand slipped under the hem of his shirt, feeling the heat of his skin, the way his muscles tensed slightly beneath my fingers. He let out a soft sound in the back of his throat, a low rumble that made my pulse stutter. He broke the kiss long enough to peel off his shirt, then reached for mine. Everything felt heightened. The quiet creak of the bed frame as we sat down, the way the sheets felt cool against my back, the weight of his body as he leaned over me, careful but intent. There was no script, no plan, just two people finally letting go of everything they'd been holding back. He kissed down my neck, his breath warm, the stubble on his jaw scraping gently against my skin. I felt everything, his touch, his hesitation, his want. It wasn't just physical, it was years of tension unraveling all at once. "You sure you want this?" he asked one last time, eyes searching mine in the dim light. I reached up, pulling him down until our foreheads touched. "I want you." That was all it took. We didn't talk much after. We didn't need to. Just soft breaths and the quiet rhythm of two people finally letting themselves fall. After, we lay tangled in his sheets, our bodies warm and sticky, our chests rising and falling in sync. Jake's arm was slung across my waist, his fingers tracing slow, lazy lines over my stomach. Neither of us spoke for a while. It was peaceful, dangerous too, because I knew the second we stepped outside that door, things might not feel this simple. But right now was perfect. Eventually, Jake spoke. "I don't know what this means," he said, his voice quieter now. "Or what Eric's gonna think, or what you want this to be." I turned my head, looking at him. "I don't know either." I admitted, but I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen, and I'm not going to pretend I didn't want it. He nodded slowly. Good. A pause. Then, softer, I don't want this to be just a one-time thing. I reached out, brushing a thumb across his cheek. Then, it won't be. Jake leaned in and kissed me again, gentle this time, more of a promise than a question. And in that quiet, still moment, everything that had once felt impossible now felt like maybe, just maybe, it could be something real. I don't think either of us slept that night. We lay there for hours, drifting in and out of soft conversation and silence, bodies tangled in that easy, unthinking way people only fall into when everything finally makes sense. The air between us was calm now, not charged, not anxious, just settled, like a puzzle piece had finally clicked into place. At some point, probably around 4 a.m., Jake sat up slowly, rubbing his face like he was trying to convince himself it wasn't all in his head. I don't think I've ever done anything like this, he said quietly, not looking at me. Had a close relationship with a guy? I asked, voice soft but steady. He nodded, then looked down at the blanket bunched around his waist. Or let myself feel something for one. I mean, shit, I don't even know what to call this. I sat up too, pulling the sheet with me. My body still ached, pleasantly, but I kept my tone gentle. You don't have to call it anything tonight. Jake looked at me, eyes searching mine for something. Permission, maybe. Reassurance. He exhaled. I don't want this to be a moment I pretend didn't happen. That made my chest tighten. Not in a bad way. And the way that meant this wasn't just a hookup to him either. Then don't, I said. We don't have to figure everything out tonight. But I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you want me to. He reached for my hand, laced his fingers through mine. I don't. A small smile pulled at my lips. Then we're good. We laid back down, and for the first time since I walked into that house hours earlier, I felt completely at peace. Morning came quicker than expected. And with it, reality. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, warm and annoyingly optimistic. Jake was still asleep beside me, his arms slung across my chest, his breath slow and even. I stared at the ceiling, heart thudding a little faster now that the world was awake again. Because soon Eric would be up. The house would be loud again, normal again. But for me, nothing about it would be the same. Jake stirred beside me. You awake? He mumbled. Yeah. He didn't open his eyes, just nuzzled into my shoulder. I wish we could stay like this. Me too. But of course we couldn't. A half hour later, we heard footsteps downstairs. Cabinet doors opening. A faucet running. Eric. Jake sat up, running both hands through his hair, looking very much like someone who was just now realizing the full weight of what he'd done. I handed him his shirt. You okay? Yeah. I don't want him to find out like this. I nodded. I get it. We got dressed quietly, each movement deliberate, like the sound of a zipper might betray us. Jake opened the door, peeked out, then turned back to me. Head down first, he said. I'll wait a few minutes. I slipped out, heart pounding, and walked past Eric in the kitchen like everything was normal. Morning, he said, halfway through making eggs. Morning, I replied, voice probably a little too casual. Thanks again for letting me crash. He waved me off. Anytime, man. You sleep okay? I nodded, grabbed a glass of water, then sat on the couch. A few minutes later, Jake came downstairs, yawning exaggeratedly, hair still messy. Damn, he said, rubbing his eyes. Last night was a blur. You good? Eric asked. Yeah, Jake replied. Grabbing a slice of toast like this was just another morning. Just tired. And just like that, the secret was sealed. At least for now. The next few days were strange in that not-so-strange kind of way, where everything technically looked the same on the outside, but underneath, everything had shifted. Eric never suspected a thing. We hung out like usual, shot the shit about football and work and the dumb podcast he was obsessed with. Nothing felt off, and yet everything did. Because Jake and I weren't just friends anymore. We weren't even just two guys with a secret anymore. There was something real blooming between us, even if we didn't know what to call it yet. Every glance Jake shot me across the room meant something now. Every text he sent after midnight, "Still up?" landed differently. Every brush of his arm when we passed each other felt deliberate, electric. We didn't talk much about that night. Not because we were avoiding it, but because neither of us wanted to reduce it to just a conversation. We were both still figuring it out. But then, the night before I was supposed to head back to my place, we finally talked. I was in the backyard again, alone this time. Just sitting on the steps where it all started, looking out at the fire pit, still half charred from the party. I hadn't realized Jake was there until he sat beside me, silent for a moment before speaking. "I don't want this to be a one-time thing," he said, just like he did that first night. But this time, his voice wasn't unsure. It was steady. I looked at him. "You said that already." He smirked. "I know, but I needed to say it again, now that I've actually had time to think about it." I nodded, waiting. He took a breath. "I'm not saying I have all the answers. Hell, I don't even know how to label it, but I know I want to see where this goes." My heart thumped hard in my chest. "Even if it's complicated?" He looked at me then, really looked. I've never been more sure about anything that felt this complicated. I let that sit for a moment, let myself feel it fully. Then I said, "Okay, then let's see where it goes." Jake smiled, and something about it felt different, lighter, like he was finally letting go of the weight he'd been carrying. He reached over, took my hand, no hesitation, no checking to see who was watching. "I like you," he said simply, and I smiled back. "I like you too." The next morning, I packed up my stuff, hugged Eric goodbye, and promised we'd hang out soon. Jake walked me to my car, the sun barely up, the street still quiet. "This isn't goodbye," I said, slinging my bag into the back seat. "No," he agreed, "but I still hate watching you drive off." I stepped in close, gave him a quick kiss, short, simple, enough to say "I'm yours," without needing to say the words. "I'll see you soon," I said, grinning. "You better." As I drove off, I checked the mirror and saw him standing there at the end of the driveway, arms crossed, smiling. And for the first time in a long time, the road ahead didn't feel uncertain, it felt wide open.